my pleasure to now invite Mr. Piyush Goyal, Union Minister for Commerce and Industry, Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution, and Textiles onto stage. Mr. Goyal, can we have you on stage? May I also invite Bodhisattva Ganguly, Executive Editor at the Economic Times, to engage the Minister in a fireside chat.
So, thank you, Minister, for doing this. Also, wanted to thank Mr. Vaishnav for that very detailed presentation. For both of you, it's the second time actually this year, but that's because our schedule had gone a little bit helter-skelter because of COVID. Hopefully, it'll come back to once a year routine from 2023. Anyway, so
our startups are doing so well. Even if you were to award them twice a year, you would still not be able to recognize all the good ones.
No, it's a. No, you're absolutely right, because some of our lists of nominees are actually so strong that one feels bad, because I've been part of the selection process, also selecting one winner. I think they're all winners, and it's a great city. Just wanted to. So there are many questions that one can ask you, from exports to FTAs and industry in general. But let me just start off with a startup-related question, because obviously India has emerged as one of the largest startup ecosystem in the world, the third largest after the US and China. We've now had hundreds of unicorns. Now, obviously, how do you see this playing out with the global economy now, seeing a flight to safety? There is risk capital is obviously declining, risk appetite is declining. Do you think India can be some kind of a safe haven as far as startups is concerned?
The last 2 days, we have been engaged with the prominent players of the startup ecosystem at Bengaluru. And I must say the enthusiasm, the energy was truly infectious. The mood is very good. And this morning, in one of the presentations that was made before all of us, one of the important elements that was made out was easy money never helps a startup succeed. A little tight-fisted, tough time is always good for a startup to come up with innovative ideas, with better thought processes and more affordable solutions to our day-to-day problems. And therefore, I don't see capital determining the success or failure of our startups. Our startups are very much focused on game-changing ideas. They're looking at day-to-day issues that business faces, that our people in their lives face, coming up with very innovative and smart solutions. And when the times are tough, that's the real time when one is encouraged to do better. While some of the international companies are talking of layoffs today, our Indian startups are offering to hire them in, including some of the persons who are on your panel. I think Harsh also mentioned that he would be hiring people. Cool. Frankly, every day that I see Twitter and all the mess that they are in, I'm so happy that I was one of the first to get on to Coup. And I think Coup should take over Twitter. That's the strength of Indian entrepreneurs, our startups. And I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that these tough times that the world is facing are an opportunity we should not miss.
So one of the ways that you can perhaps do that, and I don't know whether where there's a seller for Twitter right now, there may soon be given the situation, but is to create a very strong domestic VC industry. China has a very large sort of state-backed VC industry, startup industry. How do we do that in India?
Well, one thing is for certain that the Chinese economy got a head start over India in the early 80s. We really embarked on that process with baby steps in 91. But it's only after 2014 that we saw the Indian banking system getting cleaned up. We saw foundational changes to our economic framework. The whole startup movement also was launched by the Prime Minister on 16th of January 2016.
Right.
Until that time, we had about 500 startups registered in the ministry or in the government, maybe a few more other than that. And by and large, the culture was people wanted to look for a job. People wanted to get into government or get into a private sector job, and the traditional glide path was do your studies, go abroad if you can. If you can't go abroad, you don't get admission, you look for a IIM at best in India and then look for a job. Today, I see young kids, and Startup India engages with them even when they are in school. I see young kids, 12, 13, coming up with some very exciting ideas. Some of them as social ideas, some of them very interesting economic solutions to the problems that we have, and some scientific solutions. So my own sense and reading is that while we may have started off late, we are catching up much faster than anybody had imagined. So in the last few years, and Mr. Vaishnav just showed us an excellent presentation where he highlighted the change of mindset of the nation. And Prime Minister Modi is focusing on these structural changes which will help this country in thinking big, thinking transformational. We have to get out of the traditional path of incremental gains. And I think today the country is not going to settle for anything but truly big ticket reform, big ticket outcomes. And therefore, despite the COVID pandemic, despite the geopolitical situation being so worrying across the world, the entire planet today recognizes that India is that bright spot. Whether you talk to an economist, whether you talk to world leaders, talk to any banker, they all recognize India as the bright spot. India will lead the charge, the revival of world economies. And I personally believe that India should not be planning for anything less than a $30 trillion economy as the base case when we celebrate India at 100 in 2047. I would think that if we all put our heart and head to it and put in that little effort that Prime Minister Modi articulated in his Panch Pran on 15th August, the fifth commitment that he sought from the nation was that we'll all look at making India a developed nation as our duty. और उस कर्तव्य भावना से अगर हम सब लग जाते हैं और हमारे स्टार्टअप इकोसिस्टम में तो पूरी ताकत है, पूरी काबिलियत है करने के लिए, तो I would think that even a $40 trillion economy as the CII is projecting by 2047 is not beyond imagination.
No, let's hope that happens, and we'll soon be I think the third largest by hopefully the end of this decade, even according to most projections.
But aspire for more.
No, yeah, of course. I just wanted to ask you, one of this government has had a very strong Atmanirbhar Swadeshi orientation in backing domestic industry, right? If you look at the defense sector, everything from drones to advanced weapon systems has been opened up to the Indian private sector. The space, we just saw the first private sector space launch, earlier this week. With specifically for the startup sector, and one can even bring in events like the Ukraine war and the sanctions that were imposed on Russia. Now, whether justified or not, there are lessons. For example, WhatsApp, you would argue, is essential infrastructure in India. So how does that, obviously, coup is an alternative to Twitter, and let's see how that happens. But what is your thinking in this regard?
First of all, Bodhi, I think the media also needs to change its mindset. It's time you got some confidence in you.
Sure.
Even when I was talking of the economy numbers, I somehow didn't get the impression that you were enthusiastic about those numbers. And let me therefore articulate, because Economic Times, I think, needs to also do their maths. If you look at the Indian economy over the last 25 years, and you'll all agree the last 25 years is really not what we see the next 25 years to be. But if you see the last 25 years, we were a $270 billion economy 25 years ago. We closed 2021 at about 3.2 trillion. That's about 11x growth in 25 years. And it translates to 8.72% compounded annual growth rate in US dollar terms. Now, of course, we all understand, and I'm sure Economic Times more than anybody else, that we have a certain real growth, we have inflation, and then we have a rupee depreciation, which finally, the nominal growth, and then we have a rupee depreciation, which gives us the growth number in dollars. Now, even if we were to just extrapolate that number at 8.72% from 21 to 2047, you are looking at a $32 trillion economy. Just at that level, and we are still quite low in terms of base.
We are trained to think of next day's headline, so that's why I was not thinking that far ahead.
But in one of my sessions this morning, somebody, a startup financer, I think somebody from the finance world, Prashant, she's in the finance world, she just threw a thought for the consideration of the room that, well, 2047, India should aim to be $47 trillion. Sure. And I got my team to do a little bit of maths, that if we were to grow at 8%, real growth, and personally, I think it's not beyond imagination, not beyond the realm of probability. And given the kind of talent that is represented amongst your award winners, amongst the young people of India, what we experience when we go to the various campuses, the enthusiasm, the sheer confidence that they exude. If we were to do an 8% real growth, add inflation, and with that kind of a growth, obviously, the kind of export numbers that we are seeing, we'll probably cross 750 billion this year. In the 75th year, it's very appropriate that we cross 750 billion. We are looking at 2 trillion by 2030, services and goods. And then when you extrapolate it further to 2047, we should be looking at $6 or $7 trillion of exports of goods and services. At that level, we'll start seeing the rupee also appreciating. And thus, I wouldn't be surprised if we can actually break those barriers and really go forward with very, very strong numbers. We don't have to necessarily aspire to be only the third largest. That will be by 2027. Almost everybody is unanimous that India will be the third largest GDP in the world by 2027. And I think that's going to be the inflection point from where we'll just take off. And our aim is not only a developed India, but a developed India with inclusive growth, a developed India which takes prosperity to every single child born in this country. And that's where our startup ecosystem, I think, is making us proud.
No, undoubtedly. I mean, so it's the end of a long day, so that's why. Anyway, but I just want to ask you, the 8% GDP growth, you would actually need to raise your savings rate to the mid-30s. I mean, I think that's, just a matter of, we'll have to have a savings rate of 32, 33%. I think that's what... I think
Ashwini just showed us the curve upwards. We're already at 30. Kindly bear in mind, any economic student or somebody who understands the way capital is formed in the country will recall that in India, we had, in the second half of 30s, we were upward of 35% at one point of time.
That's right.
Where did we go wrong? Look back into the story 15 years ago.
The whole NPMS.
Yeah, exactly. So you know the whole thing, Bodhi. We went wrong when we started indiscriminately lending money to the wrong borrowers, and we in the startup world clearly know that it's the entrepreneur who matters more than the project and the idea. More often than not, Prashant will put in money on a good entrepreneur, even if the idea is half-baked, rather than put in money in a good idea, a big, fully baked idea, but where he's not comfortable with the entrepreneur. Our banking system, and maybe there was an element of telebanking which we are told prevailed in the 2006 to 2012 period in very big measure, when we saw bank credit going up by leaps and bounds. Vedi is nodding his head. He was very much a part of the banking system. And we saw the way banks used to lend indiscriminately. Now, that's the Chinese model. It's like what's happened in China. Nobody in this room knows the real story of the Chinese banks. I also don't know it. But the story is that the Chinese banks are all in trouble. But they used easy liquidity, lent money indiscriminately. They have not yet recognized the reality in their banking system. And we have a situation today where if that bubble was to burst one day, I think the third largest will quickly move to the second largest,
Well,
faster than you and I can imagine.
absolutely.
And therefore, capital formation is something which I see happening in the country and happening very, very quickly.
Just pause for 1 minute.
I think we should welcome the Honorable Chief Minister with a round of
Minister has
applause.
joined. Welcome, sir.
You should say Namaskara
Namaskara.
in Bengaluru.
I'll ask you some local questions on the film. Anyway, at the end of this thing. So let me, one of the ways in which we can raise our growth rates, and you talked about is obviously exports, which is, and one of the ways exports can go up is through FTAs. So you're now, where are we in terms of the FTA with the UK? And I think there's one with the EU, which is also perhaps following the UK one, which is in the works.
Both of you will be very proud to know, as will every one of our friends assembled here today, that the entire world, literally the entire world today, wants to enter into an arrangement, a free trade agreement or an economic partnership with India. Something for every Indian to be proud, because they see the potential that each one of you has. The United Kingdom, they were very keen to close the free trade agreement by Diwali, but we are all aware of the political turmoil in that country over the last 3-4 months, which held them back. The European Union we launched a few months ago, and we've had 3 rounds already. Discussions are ongoing. But the European Union is 27 countries. And you need to build up consensus and literally negotiate a deal in which every one of them also gets interested and is willing to sign off. Canada, we are looking at an early progress partnership where we are trying to look at the low-hanging fruits. By the way, in the middle of my startup conference this afternoon, I also did a video call with my counterpart from Canada, Mary NG, because we've discussed and decided that every 15 days, we'll progress and review the progress of the FTA. That's the level of interest. And now, because of the UK delay, Canada is very keen that we want to be the first G7 country to sign up with India. So we are having 2 ladies, ministers, negotiating with India to see who goes first. Having said that, next week, we'll be launching another free trade agreement negotiation with a group of 6 countries. I've had 4 rounds of discussions where Switzerland Minister Guy Parmelin has been requesting me that they have a group of 4 countries, the EAEU alliance. They want to negotiate a free trade agreement. I remember when I became Commerce Minister in 19, at Davos I asked him in another engagement, 2 or 3 occasions, I asked them that we would like to do an FTA with you because EU at that time hadn't opened up. And they would just look at us with disdain. Now for the last 2 years, they've been asking me they want to do an FTA. I don't have bandwidth to get my teams. They're already doing 2 shifts. They do 1 negotiation in the morning, another in the evening. I'm worried we may not land up making mistakes, but they are very keen. Russia is a group of a few countries, EFTA probably, or I've confused the 2. Russia is EAU and Switzerland is EFTA. Everybody, Russia wants to start
EFTA is the
negotiating.
European Free Trade Area, which is
That's
within
right.
Switzerland. Yeah.
So they want to, Russia and its group of countries wants to start the FTA negotiations. I can tell you today the world is looking up to the big India opportunity. Look at the delta from 3.5 trillion. You have a delta which could be 32 trillion, which could be 40 trillion. We don't know.
Yeah.
They are also seeing it just like we can see it. They are also seeing the delta. No other part of the world has this kind of a delta in the next 25 years. And therefore, we are on a good sweet spot, but negotiations have to come up with a fair, balanced and equitable agreement. No agreement is going to be signed up for the sake of an agreement. It has to be win-win for both. We need to open up some, they need to open up their markets for us. We need good market access. We need to be sure that the agreement gives tangible and substantial gains to both sides. And these agreements are not for a few years or a decade. They outlast probably all our lives. And therefore, one has to do it very carefully. In the past, our experiences when I go into the files, agreements were often rushed through. You can rush something. Time is not required to do a thing smarter or better. But sadly, the kind of deals that I'm finding did not give us the opportunities that we should have got in other countries, that we should have negotiated hard with other countries. We are being very, very cautious in our negotiations, but I can assure you, we will get good free trade agreements as and when we sign up. We'll open up large market opportunities for our startups, for our technologies, for our innovators in those countries. We are focusing on goods, we are focusing on services, we are looking at education in a big way, we are looking at working with these countries for joint collaborations in innovation, R&D. Sky's the limit, potential is huge. Together, with the support of all the participants here today and the startup ecosystem, which is now 82,000 strong and growing by the day, with the kind of technological innovations we are using for public good, to take services to the people, be it the ONDC, the Open Network for Digital Commerce, be it the success story of UPI, be it our effort for giving free food to 80 crore people through the COVID pandemic for 28 months now, so that not a single child or not a single family had to sleep hungry through this tough time. All of these measures are helping India strengthen at the core and become an economy ready to take off.
So I think we're coming to the end of our time. We'll just ask you one question. I think I've been reading the reports of some of your engagements in Bangalore. You've spoken about this local film Kanthara, which has been a phenomenal, I think, an all-India success. Why don't you talk a bit about that? What are the lessons which a movie like this with a low budget holds for the startup sector?
I think it's a great lesson for all of us. It shows us money can't buy you everything. So Kantara was a low budget film. I'm told at 16 or 18 crores the whole movie was made. B, you need to have your ideas right. You need to have clarity in thought. And Kantara presented its storyline with a great deal of clarity. C, you need to be connected to the masses. Kantara got resonance across the country, now going international also.
Right.
So it worked for a larger audience. It had an appeal to a larger audience, and which is one of our strengths today in India. Economies of scale. Economies of scales helps our technologies get bigger markets, helps us becoming low cost and more affordable. And I can give you so many examples, the LED old story being the least of all, which is public good, which helped our people and helped the nation in every respect. So Kantara in some sense shows us that our startups and the work that they are doing, very often, look at the spaceship that went out yesterday, or day before yesterday. And look at the work that's happening, let's say, in the various incubators across the country. We'll have another spaceship being launched next month, probably coming out of IIT Madras. and something which is only because the regulatory framework in India has now been made so friendly so that private sector can participate. Pawan Goenka has been made in charge of InSpace to encourage the private sector participation. Drones, there were so many policies holding us back from drones. We are now looking to have a leadership position in drones. So I think the idea behind the ease of doing business efforts, the efforts to make everything more and more public oriented, get the people and the Indian businesses and private sector involved, is to see if we can get business out of the common man's life and let the private sector flourish, give them more opportunity. They can create 1 million kantaras every single month, and they can serve the people of India through their innovations and their outstanding ideas at scale in a large country like India, so that our lives become easier, our businesses become better and much, much more profitable.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Request you to stay on stage. We'll have to give away a few awards. Let me assure you that the Economic Times also committed to the 30 trillion economy goal by 2047.
Don't squirm so much, Bodhi. 30 क्यों 40 पे जाओ यार.
Barabar. I agree. We should be. It'll help everyone. And so thank you. Thank you for those inspiring words. Thank you.
Thank you.